Welcome to today's episode. We are very thrilled to have Craig Hickman with us today. He has been a top-level manager in multinational companies, a writer, and also a creative painter. So, Craig, thank you so much for being here with us. I would like to start, the first big question for me is how a top-level manager becomes a writer and then after a painter.
Okay, it's a great question. So as an undergraduate, I was torn between economics and English, and so I kind of focused on both. But I always knew I was going to go to business school. So, and I did. I went to the Harvard Business School, which was a fabulous experience for me. And the expectation when you go to Harvard is that you're going to become a CEO someday. That's just the expectation. So you feel like, well, gee, if that doesn't happen, that means I wasn't true to my graduate education. But I left the business school and became a management consultant. And I worked for a couple of companies. I worked for example, Dart Industries, which owned Tupperware and Duracell batteries and a number of other, it was a conglomerate. And I worked in the strategy area with them and worked with McKinsey and Company. So got my postgraduate McKinsey and Company experience. But I was always, I was drawn to writing. I think part of it was my focus on English earlier. I always remember my 8th grade teacher told me I should be a writer. Ela falou que você seria bom escritor. And I never thought about that. I just didn't think writing was something I would do. But after I got out of graduate school, and partly during my 2 years at Harvard, I realized that communicating was really important, a part of what I wanted to do. So eventually I started my own firm and started that firm after having written the first book. So my co-author and I, Michael Silva, we wrote a book called Creating Excellence. It came out, it was one of those great timing things. If you remember, there was a book in the U.S., really it's sold worldwide, called In Search of Excellence. Mm-hmm. And it came out so we're talking early 1980s,
right.
So 1982. So our book was the second book in that kind of area, and the name of it was Creating Excellence. Came out in 1984, and it immediately hit the bestseller list and became this national phenomenon. And my co-author and I were traveling all over the country, giving lectures and doing workshops, making speeches, and selling books, and then helping companies. Then we had clients who wanted to implement what we had written about in Creating Excellence, and I wanted to keep writing. So I found I was trying to get this balance of spending about half of my time consulting. So I was working on my own now with my own company as an entrepreneur, being a consultant, and wanted to continue writing books. And so that just kind of, from 1984 until the present, I've been writing books. So far, I have written 19 books.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. One of those is yet to be published. And
also, go
ahead.
You shift from management books to fiction, right?
Yeah. So as I was writing business books, primarily focusing on writing what were the most topical. So I really was focused on the areas of strategy, business strategy, corporate culture, and change. And how do you manage change as a leader? So those 3 elements were kind of my focus: strategy, culture, and leadership. And those are the topics I wrote about. But as I started writing, I wrote a book called Mind of a Manager, Soul of a Leader that actually did very well in Europe. It was one of the management bestsellers in France for several months. And they were little vignettes, like little stories in this book. And so I started experimenting with how do I write differently? And So this is in the early, this is now the early 1990s, and I decided to write a book. It's called The Strategy Game, O Jogo de Estratégia. It was
Portuguese very well, by the way.
Yeah, and actually, there were in Brazil there were business schools that were using it as part of their curriculum,
Right.
and but the Strategy Game was my first entry into writing fiction. So it's a story. It's a fictitious story that puts the reader in the position of the CEO of a company that's in trouble. And at the end of each chapter, you have to make a choice. So it's like a choose your own adventure.
All right.
There are multiple endings in the book. So at the end of chapter 1, you have to make a strategic decision. So this is a book about strategy.
That's also creative from your side. Right?
Yeah. And so at the end, there are like 15 multiple endings.
Right.
And some of them, you make a lot of money. Some of them you go bankrupt.
Right.
And so it's an opportunity. And so we had a lot of clients that were using it as a tool for developing strategic thinking.
Right.
American Express was one that used it a lot.
Right.
So we would go in and actually print the chapters, and they'd get into groups, and they'd make their decisions in groups. And then it became a competition. So who's choosing the best? And why did they choose the options? So that was my first entry into writing fiction. I loved it. About the same time, we were talking earlier about the difference between the business mindset and the artist mindset, the creative mindset. And I remember there's a book called The Artist Way. And I was really intrigued. They were doing workshops. This was in Banff, Canada. And so I went for 3 days, and it was I was there with CEOs, senior executives that were there with the purpose of how do we bring more creativity, more the artful side of management into the picture of leadership.
Right.
And so the really interesting thing is the business way is you start with the end in mind. What do we want to be in terms of revenue in 3 years, 5 years? How much market share do we want to have? And then you develop a strategy and then a culture and a leadership team to deliver that end result. Well, the artist way is totally different.
Yeah.
You don't begin, there's no end. You just start. And then you follow the golden thread. And it was about that same period of time.
But in business, that's a scary thing, right? I mean, not knowing where you want to go. I mean, when you're between managers or a team of management, that could be a very hard time for you, right?
Yeah.
So.
But what happens, and what I realized, I started doing more consulting with this. Sometimes you have to identify some basics of, okay, I'm going to paint. I'm not going to sculpt. I'm going to create this kind of painting. It's like a strategy. We know we want to be in this market. We're not sure exactly how competitors are going to react. We're going to have to be very fluid. We're going to have to be very agile and adapt quickly. And the strategy we have today is not going to be the strategy we have in 6 months, because the world's changing very quickly, and it's changing faster and faster these days. So business strategy became this more fluid. So the artistic side, the creative side is important. You got to think like a business person, but you also have to think like an artist. And so that's what the workshop was all about, is that it's this combination. And I'd written this book about managers and leaders and the difference between managers and leaders. One of the issues is managers are very step-by-step, logical, pragmatic. Leaders are more artistic, creative, more visionary, and the fact is businesses need both, especially when the world is changing so fast. So for me, that's when I started painting seriously. After that experience in Banff, Canada, so this is again early 90s, because I discovered that painting allowed me to experience the artist way and kind of ingrain it. Because it's what writing fiction is like. Because you start a story. I remember writing Strategy Game. I didn't know what all those multiple endings were going to be until I'm writing it. So I'm writing it, and it's like a decision tree. And
You also start discovering
Yeah.
by yourself, and you're the writer.
yeah, you start discovering other strategies. Oh, it could be this. So then you go do research to identify, okay, who's written what about this kind of strategic thinking or this kind of strategic positioning. And so that continued to infuse my business writing. And along the way, I wrote a business novel, which was an actual novel. And then I wrote my first full-blown novel, and the name of that was The Insiders. And I remember my painting continued to evolve, and what it helped me do. So when you're writing a novel, you've got these characters, and you need to see them as real people, and because they become your friends, and you get to know them really well. And if you don't know them well, then you can't write about them. So you have to go deep. So painting became a way. So I love to paint faces. It's basically the only thing I paint now, is I paint faces. And what was amazing for me in this process of kind of combining writing and painting, especially with fiction, is that you just make a small modification in the eye, how the lips go, or where the cheekbones are. Just you make small modifications, it changes the whole feeling about the person. And that's the way it is with writing too. These small little details make the characters come alive. And so painting it was like my touchstone as I was writing. So I'd write and then do some painting, and then I'd change the painting, and it's always just keep that in mind, because in words, you're describing the same thing, that when you make these small modifications, it makes all the difference.
Yes. Yeah.
One sentence can make you feel totally different about a character or a situation.
Well, I have to thank you because you saved me from troubles, because you answered my next 3 questions.
Okay.
Already. So, but I will let you know what the questions were. In what ways has your artistic practice influenced your views on management and leadership? Kind of answered, or in reverse. I think it's both sides, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is not, but can you share examples of how artistic methods of thinking have helped solve business or management challenges in your experience?
Yeah, in my experience, especially as a consultant, because I've over the years as a consultant, I did run a company for 5 years. It was a specialty chemical company, so I was the CEO. I did become a CEO, but they were a client, and they were I checked that box.
Harvard CEO check.
But I told them, my client, they made an acquisition. They bought this company, and I was consulting the company. It was a company that was developing a lot of new specialty chemicals, catalysts, and they had difficulties. So I was consulting. So the parent company asked me if I would come and run it. I said, look, as much as I was trained to do that, I like to write and I like to consult. But I agreed to go for 3 years. I ended up staying for 5. But it was a great experience for me. But it was just one more. You can't, especially in a world that is changing so rapidly, you cannot predict everything. You cannot predict what your competitors are going to do. You cannot predict how the market is going to shift and change. You cannot predict what new innovations are going to affect you. So you've got to be nimble and agile and adaptive all the time. And so strategy, I think what's happened over the last couple of decades, as companies approach business strategy, it's all become much more fluid. And if you have an artist, if you let your artistic mind develop, and because as an artist, the whole objective, especially if you're writing fiction, you're following the golden thread. Now the golden thread is the plot line. It's the arc of the story. It's the where is this going? Where are the challenges? Where are the pitfalls? What is the major, the major obstacle you're trying to? But it changes, and people do different things. And if you try to create all of that and then just write to the plan, is not very interesting. I've tried that. I tried that approach.
Trust me.
Yeah, trust me, because people aren't. That's not life. We are human beings, and life is fluid, And now we live in times that change very, very rapidly. And so helping, I was always dealing with senior executives and CEOs, helping them deal with, develop your artistic side. Now it's become pretty common. There's an art to business and there's a science to business. They're two parts. They're
just like you have in art. I mean,
that's right.
Painting.
Exactly.
It's the same.
Almost
the same, but it's the same mindset.
The only difference is as an artist, you often don't know where it's going to end up. And some artists will paint over the same painting, several times until they're comfortable. Or for me, for example, I'll play with a painting for months while I'm writing. For months. I'm not. No, this one's not done yet. This one's not done. I'm not. And so you keep playing with it, and it kind of continues to evolve.
You are getting to know the character also because of that. Or?
That's right. Yeah. Right.
And
the same thing happens with a business strategy. The more flexible you are, the more fluid you are, the more you take in. It's a famous U2. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure who came up with this first. I need to research that. But it's the more you know, the less you see.
Yeah. Yes.
And the more you see, the less you know. Yes. And so the point is, if you are open and you're following that golden thread, it makes you mais esperta.
Absolutely.
You see things that you wouldn't if you're just sticking to a plan. You're going to miss stuff. But if you're following the golden thread, realizing that I've got to pay attention to everything because our product, our strategy, our services, there are nuances and changes going on, and being on top of that to make the appropriate adjustments and adaptations at the appropriate time. That makes a big difference.
I relate with that very much, and that reminds me, Rory Sutherland, vice president of Ogilvy, he wrote The Alchemist, and he talks a lot about it. Things that people don't get or understand, and actually doesn't make any sense at all, but they work best at the end. And no one would bet on that because it just doesn't make sense. Especially when you're in a board meeting. So it's very interesting that already on the 80s, 90s, you had that mindset working on your books, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to ask you also, because we know your paintings, they are also online at stronddo.art, and your faces and big canvas also, which is also interesting. Are there any upcoming projects that you are thinking or working on, or something that you would like to do next?
What I've been playing with lately is kind of really abstract. So I was really into eyes, like the eyes.
The blue eyes?
If you can catch this on camera. So we do a lot of paintings with eyes because I loved playing with the eyes.
Yeah.
Playing with the light.
Your blue eyes? Or?
Yeah. That's what, people who've seen this say, yeah, what, you just painted yourself here? But that I've been playing with just really abstract, like these two.
Right.
So I think I'll play with this a little more.
So you're not thinking on...
But I'm not. Nope. I'm I'm on the golden thread right now, and I'm happy with this. But I think this will last a little longer, but it'll go somewhere else. I just finished writing the first full-blown novel that I wrote was back in... the first edition came out in 2009. Then I did some rewriting. Came out in 2012. Then I wrote a sequel. Came out in 2014. This is the third. It's taken a while. So 10 years later, the third. I've just finished the third in the series. It's called the Insider series, and so I'm still doing some editing on it. But there will be a fourth, and there may be another series. But when I start a new novel, I think there'll probably be a new
chapter.
A new chapter of my painting too. I'll start playing with some other things.
I think there is also another question I would like to make, which is could be easy to ask you what advice could you bring to management, but I think it's more interesting because is probably where we felt, generally speaking. What could an artist, what could be the mindset of an artist? Usually, generally speaking, an artist is not connected with business mindset. And I'm not saying that it should be, but they could open an eye or do something like to have a mindset on that area, because sometimes they don't sell much or they just don't show up much. In your opinion, what could they do differently?
Yeah, I think it's about. I mean, we live in an age where the complexity of our world requires that we combine these different. For example, in business, if you go back to the 1950s, in business the attitude was you don't bring your emotions to work. Don't bring your emotions to work. Passion has no place here. You come, you're logical, you're pragmatic, everything's practical. You follow the structure of the organization, and that's how business runs. Leave your emotions at home. Well, that's not how business works anymore. Now it's like, bring your passion. We need your emotion. We need your creativity, because we're innovating. We need visionaries that think off the wall, out of the box. So that's something that's happened in business. The same thing needs to happen in art. The old view of the artist is, I cannot stain or taint my art with worrying about business. No, that will destroy me as an artist. I get that. I understand that. I want to focus on my art and let, whether it sells or not, doesn't matter. I'm focusing on my art. But the artist that is aware of trends in the marketplace, the artist that is aware of the business side, how galleries work, how online works, how people look for art, purchase art. My argument is that the more awareness you have doesn't mean that needs to guide you. You don't need to forsake your artist's roots, but having more awareness so you can factor that in, I think makes you a better artist.
Yes, that's a good point, and I think will be very helpful. And because there are some cases that it's really a matter of mindset.
Yeah.
Because people think that I'm selling my soul, or this is my art,
and I can't do that.
I can change a thing and sometimes they are blocking themselves. That's the way I feel about it. I don't mean that is wrong, but I think I actually think that the business mindset is also needed for the artist.
Yeah, and I think it's healthy. Just like in business, you have to pay attention to what your competitors are doing, what innovations they're coming up with, and the best artists do this informally. They have their network. They're talking to their colleagues. They're aware of, and I'm not suggesting that so if something does really well and they get a lot of attention, you should go copy it. No, it's more being aware and thinking about how that could be incorporated into your own work, I think is healthy. I mean, there's still artists who would prefer to starve and someday hope that their art is discovered, but they don't care.
Yeah.
But there are also artists that get so focused on the business side that they're cranking out all kinds of stuff that sells, and they're doing it in a way that brings the price down and makes their art available all over the world. I'm not critical of either one. You got to find your own place. All I'm suggesting is, it's what I wrote about in Mind of a Manager, Soul of a Leader. There's a continuum. You have at one end of the continuum, you've got the leaders that are visionaries and they're conceptual and they're very creative. And at the other end, you've got managers that are very concrete and practical and logical and step by step. Business needs everyone along that continuum. You need to orchestrate all those capabilities. So as an artist, the more versatile you are in your own ability to move or kind of be open to possibilities, I think it makes you a better artist and a more successful artist.
Thank you, Craig. I think that spot on, even in our slogan as creativity connects us. So as hearing you take the picture that absolutely the creativity is really an asset for anyone who wants to be whether in the business or as an artist.
Yeah.
Also, you have a very beautiful place here. It's your hand, or you have some help?
Yes.
I think you have some help, right?
Yes. Patricia Statler is an amazing interior designer.
Okay.
And when I started, and she's the one that kind of created this environment for, I was going out to write because I couldn't stay inside. So I'd go out. I'd go out to a cafe, a restaurant. I'd go out to, I'd find a wonderful Miradoro.
All right.
And write, either hand or usually on a computer. But I told her I wanted to create in an apartment which doesn't have a lot of, we have 2 bedrooms here, but I wanted various locations, different places where I could write, and I wanted a banco where I could, and I wanted a bar.
Okay. Yes, you have it.
And so, there are multiple places for me to kind of, because depending on the mood, I'm either reading more and editing less, or I'm editing more and reading more slowly. And so different locations in the house. And there's, I can go into the bedroom, another location.
No doubt
it's
that-
been, I didn't have to leave as often. And so I've been in Portugal for a year and a half. So I started writing this 3rd novel here in Lisbon. And eu não queria escrever este livro nos Estados Unidos. Não queria. Eu queria, eu sabia que eu necessitava uma perspectiva diferente fora dos Estados Unidos. Porque é um livro sobre a riqueza do mundo e como que pode ser abusado. E so I needed to, and there are other reasons. I got tired of the U.S. and I've always wanted to live in Europe. And
so you're here to stay for a while, or?
Yeah. So I've been writing this 3rd novel for the last year and a half, and it's done. I'm still doing some revision. So I'm going back to the U.S. for a few months.
You're voting, or?
Yes, I'm gonna vote. We'll see what happens.
See what happens.
It's
Either you stay or come.
yeah,
Come again.
yeah. It's
Depending
very,
on-
it's.
what
I think the whole world knows that it's become rather ridiculous, but it is what it is. And so yes, but the plan is that I will come back to Portugal. I will probably start the next novel in the U.S. sometime this summer.
Okay.
So yeah,
When you
but I've loved it. I've loved it here.
And we can do another interview with you if you
Yeah.
will, when you have the novel running.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Greg, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gonzalo.
It was a really pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.